Hello everyone, live commentary once again here today. We're going to discuss video game publishers. I recently have had a partnership terminated with a video game publisher that we were going to work with on Cross-Planet, my third-person shooter project. However, after this publisher essentially did nothing in the first 2 months of the partnership, we decided to terminate the contract as we felt like they brought very little to the table and we were still doing all of the work. Now, I'm not saying that every publisher is bad, but let's be real here, a lot of them are making games worse. They take huge cuts from game sales and set ridiculous deadlines. They also try and force developers to make decisions that simply ruin games, and the worst part is they barely take any blame for things that go wrong. Firstly, let's talk about the money aspect. A lot of people don't realize just how much money publishers take from game sales. The lowest percentage that I see publishers take is 30% of the game's sales. If you can get a publisher to do a deal of 30% of the profit or 30% of the game's sales after Steam's cut, that's a pretty good deal to have. Most publishers want an even bigger slice of the pie when they don't actually do any of the development work. The publisher that I recently was partnered with took 50% of the revenue that was going to be made from our game. And some publishers take even more percentage than the developers, meaning the developers no longer own the highest equity within their business. Some publishers will take 70% of the revenue generated from a game, which means that after Steam's 30% cut, or Epic's 15, GOG's 30, Apple's 30, Play Store's 30, developers are often left with absolute scraps. That's right, the developers, the people who are actually making the game, only get a fraction of the money when everything is said and done. And sometimes it gets even worse. Publishers often demand equity in an entire studio, meaning they don't just take money from sales, they take ownership and rights for the game. This is how big companies like EA, Activision, etc. have swallowed up smaller studios, and when those games underperform, they just shut down the studio like it never existed. A prime example is what EA did to Visceral Games, the studio behind Dead Space. They took them over, pushed them to make a linear Star Wars game, and shut them down immediately when it didn't work out. And there are many such cases of this, especially in recent years. You'll hear games releasing and being dropped, the entire studio filing for bankruptcy, servers shutting down, etc., literally months after games releases. So here's a bit of my personal experience. Like I said, the studio that we were working with, the publisher we were working with, wanted 50% of the revenue, and they didn't even give us any money in return. Usually, that's why you would work with the publisher, is because they have the capital already, they have the funds to push your game, to enhance development, to hire members of staff, to hire potential freelancers, contractors, maybe buy more assets, and the most important one is often to market the game to a new audience. Publishers also claim they can do good PR and things for you, like get you interviews, or maybe they can get you an article by something like Eurogamer, IGN, Rock Paper Shotgun, etc. They can help you with trailers, and they can get influencers to play your games. But after 8 weeks of being partnered with the studio that we were working with, they did essentially nothing. They made 2 graphics, one which was an end screen for our newest YouTube trailer, and the other one was a simple 340 by 200 PNG or something that said about the game. It was literally just like essentially a panel for our Steam page. I whipped up an alternative for both of these, which was better, therefore we used it in the space of about 15 minutes. And ultimately, yeah, we didn't use anything that the publisher made. Well, the 2 things they did make. We had, I think, 3, possibly 4 meetings with them to discuss pricing, the plan for release dates, the plan for any new content, which things would be fixed if the game is going into early access before launch, etc, etc, possible pricing, and a little bit about marketing. And things seemed pretty good. The discussions were, you know, some things maybe good, some things maybe shit. But overall, going into it, we felt pretty good, and then they just did nothing. They did absolutely nothing, basically, for the next, couple of months. So one of the things that I immediately didn't like is the harsh deadlines that were set. One of the biggest problems with publishers is how they rush games to meet deadlines, instead of letting developers take the time needed to make a good product. Publishers force like a strict release date based on business decisions, not whether the game is ready or not. We're a team of 2, and they were outlining a release in like 5 to 6 months' time. Our game probably won't be ready in 9 to 12 months. Or at least not content complete. You could look at an early access release in 9 months, but a full release with all the content we initially planned to have, you're probably looking at like a year and a half, maybe 2 years. The game's going to be in early access for a while, I think. The initial plan we outlined and the timekeeping we were doing said we could do this in 6 months if we put tons of work in, but realistically we're not going to spend 4 to 8 hours every single day on this. We might spend 30 minutes to an hour a day, because we want this to be a passive project that we enjoy, not something that we feel like we're forced to do, and a publisher doesn't let you do that. I mean, an example we can all remember was how bad Cyberpunk was. CD Projekt Red was pressured by investors and the publisher to release the game in 2020. It wasn't their decision, and this was despite the fact that it wasn't finished, and it also was delayed previously as well, which should have told everyone from the beginning, this isn't ready yet. We all know the story there. The game was a broken mess on launch, leading to refunds, lawsuits, and a damaged reputation. Another good example was Battlefield 2042. EA pushed it out the door in an unplayable state, missing loads of features the previous games had, and if they just give devs more time, this wouldn't happen. These games would have much stronger launches. The famous quote, which I'm sure many of you will know, comes to mind: "A delayed game is eventually good, but a rushed game is forever bad." Another thing is that publishers have way too much control over how a game is monetized. The pricing for our game was going to be entirely decided by the publisher. We as the developers, who know the content, who know the bugs that remain, who have worked on this thing for, by then, 5, maybe 6 years, we don't get to set the price. The publisher, who steps in at the last minute when there's a few months left, they set the price, which makes no sense, and I'm pretty sure they had like a minimum price because I didn't see any of the games on their Steam page below like $8. Same goes for microtransactions. If you're a free-to-play title, the publisher will be heavily involved in the pricing of your microtransactions and even suggest new microtransactions for the game as well. Some that are outrageous, just utterly outrageous. For example, I'll give you a prime example here. One of the guys who works for the publisher that we were involved with suggested that we make people pay for weapons. Our game currently has 11 guns, we're working on adding a few more. The publisher suggested that we start people with just an assault rifle and a pistol, and they must literally use real money to buy other weapons like a rocket launcher, a sniper, an SMG, a machine gun, etc. You wouldn't be able to earn them in game, you wouldn't be able to pick them up on maps like an arena shooter, they wouldn't be attached to loadouts like a hero shooter. You would literally have to pay like $1.99 for each weapon. I don't even think like a lot of mobile games have microtransactions that aggressive. Like, pay to win off the rip is insane. I quickly shut this down and said we don't want to be a pay-to-win game. We will annoy 95% of the audience if we do that. It's just a bad decision. And then they immediately said, well, what if we give all the players the weapons, but they can buy variants of the weapons that have more damage, less recoil, faster fire rate, more ammunition, etc. Well, immediately this reminds me of Call of Duty Advanced Warfare, where you could buy supply drops and you'd get, tier 2, 3, 4 of weapons. Again, it would just piss off players that don't have the money to buy better weapons. It's the same thing. I remember as a kid in college playing Call of Duty Advanced Warfare with my regular BAL assault rifle, and some guy called XX00MLGX Pro Snipes XX00 would kill me like 9 times out of 10 because he had the BAL Inferno variant that did like 20% more damage than me. So the only way I'd ever win gunfights is if I attack him from behind. That's the kind of like gameplay loop that it creates when you do stuff like that. It's just greed from the publisher. They don't think about how the players are going to react to things like that. They just think, ooh, we can make more money if we make people pay for weapons or variants or abilities, etc. I mean, hell, this publisher even suggested that we make people pay for extra maps. Like, I'd argue some of this stuff, some of the suggestions, is worse than, like, EA Sports FC's Ultimate Team, which is known to be one of, like, the worst pay-to-win mechanics in video game history, pretty much. I'm pretty sure that Ultimate Team makes EA like billions every year, so yeah, quite a statement to say that some of these suggestions were probably worse than that. And finally, I just want to touch on false promises and what I would consider basically straight up lies, but legally because of contract language they aren't. What I mean is, when you sign a contract with a publisher, they will have a lot of things in what we call contract jargon, which makes it hard for the average Joe to understand. For example, a publisher claiming that they will get your game in front of the eyes of the biggest streamers of the world, such as Ninja, Summit1G, Moist Critical, etc. What they mean by that is that they will cold call them and send them an email with your game attached, like a Steam code that they can redeem. That's what they mean by the game will be in front of the eyeballs of those streamers. They don't mean that the streamers are actually going to play the game. They mean, we'll just send them an email with a code attached. And if the off chance they play it, then there you go, like huge marketing for us. But they don't actually promise these streamers will play the game. Another one is claiming they can assist with porting the game to consoles. PlayStation and Xbox was mentioned to us. When we dove deeper into that topic in our second or third meeting with this publisher, they clarified eventually and said, we don't actually support like getting your game onto those platforms. We just supply you guys with a dev kit each so you can work on doing it yourselves. I can buy a dev kit for like £400, $500. I don't need you guys to provide that. I need you guys to assist on actually getting the game onto those platforms, helping QA the game on those platforms, doing the communicating with Microsoft and Sony, etc. So yeah, that's, in a very short summary, my experience with publishers. And ultimately, as I said, we terminated the partnership with ours. We'd be open to having a new publisher come on board, but we'd be doing a lot more due diligence and research before we sign anything. And there'd also have to be a price tag attached. I don't think we'd ever sign anything again that doesn't guarantee us development funds or marketing funds. But at the end of the day, publishers very, very likely aren't going anywhere. But as gamers, we need to be aware of how they operate. A lot of great studios have been shut down because of publisher greed, and so many great games have been ruined before they even had a chance. Let me know in the comments what you think the worst thing you've seen a publisher do is, and thanks for watching. Drop a like if you enjoyed, subscribe for more, and wishlist Cross Planet on Steam. See you next time.